Get started. Thank you everyone for joining our presentation today on Windows Virtual Desktop. Applied Cloud Systems is a partner with Microsoft, a Microsoft Gold partner. We work heavily in the WVD space, and WVD has been a very interesting product to work with during the COVID-19 outbreak. So I'll step through a couple slides here, give you a little background on Applied Cloud, who we are and what we do, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Chris Bennett, who will lead you through the rest of the presentation. With that being said, introductions. My name is Phil Rainsberger. I'm the account executive with Applied Cloud. I work with the nonprofits and Microsoft's Tech for Social Impact team. So we do work with a number of customers across the nation on their Microsoft solutions. Applied Cloud ourselves, we work with all three of Microsoft's clouds, so Azure, Dynamics, and Office 365. So we're heavily into the cloud space. We help customers with projects around deploying Azure, migrating applications, databases, entire data centers up into Azure. We do modern workplace projects as well, and we also support Dynamics 365. So we do have we do operate in a fashion where we tailor our services to our customers' needs, and we do like to work with our customers side by side, shoulder to shoulder, in order to give them the skills they need to manage that environment, whether it's Azure, Office 365, manage that environment on an ongoing basis. So whatever your needs may be, today we're going to talk about WVD, as we've done well over 50 engagements with WVD for various customers. So whether it's infrastructure, WVD, Microsoft Office 365, and whether you're an existing Azure customer and looking to scale out, or a Greenfield Azure customer, we work with all types of customers, all sizes of customers, in order to help them move forward with their cloud solutions. Next slide, Chris. So this will give you an idea of our capabilities around what we offer at ACS. So as I mentioned, Office 365, a lot of Office 365 migrations, a lot of Teams implementations in response to COVID-19, also helping customers get their on-prem SharePoint instances over to SharePoint Online. Typically, the next step a customer would like to take is moving into the cloud. So around the Azure space, we lead cloud adoption framework programs with these customers, and that allows them to set the landing space for their Azure install, allow them to start to migrate, get all the framework security policies set up, and begin to migrate those applications, databases, or create new applications within the cloud. Obviously, that entails the IaaS piece as well. So getting all the networking infrastructure, VMs set up and running, performing those migrations, leveraging different programs within Microsoft as far as hybrid use benefits to save on licensing costs. So again, we help our customers tailor their environments and take advantage of those items in order to save on costs in the Azure space. Then we also have an app modernization and development team at ACS. So we're heavy into the data warehousing, modern data warehousing initiatives, with a lot of work with Power BI and Power Platform as a whole. So Power BI for the presentation layer. We also work with Power Apps, and as well as machine learning and AI modeling. And then there's always the app modernization. So we do various app assessments for customers where we can come in, take a look at existing on-premise custom applications, and make recommendations on how to best leverage cloud solutions in order to deploy those applications as platform as a service offerings, and be able to monitor and ultimately reduce costs by leveraging those cloud solutions. Next slide, Chris. So in response to COVID-19, we've seen a big uptick with Windows Virtual Desktop. On this slide, we show some of the customers in the nonprofit space that we've worked with. So WVD is top of mind for many customers and has been for the past few months, leveraging a remote environment for their workforce. We've also created a health bot, a chat bot, if you will, for SUNY, and leverage that in order to help people navigate how they should respond around the coronavirus. And then Teams is another area where we've seen an uptick in customers who would like to leverage the collaboration facilities that Microsoft Teams provides. So we've worked with a number of customers on Teams as well. And next slide, Chris. Okay, so that concludes my intro of ACS and who we are. At this point, I'll turn it over to Chris Bennett, who is one of ACS's Practice Delivery Managers, and they'll lead us through the rest of the WVD presentation. So Chris, all yours.
Thanks, Phil. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, hear you fine.
Excellent. Morning, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. As Phil mentioned, this is Chris Bennett, Practice Delivery Manager for ACS, leading up our WVD implementation teams, as well as owning the product that we put together for managing the environment from an administrative layer. Basically, as Phil mentioned, we've got two paths with Windows Virtual Desktop, fairly straightforward. You either have Azure or you don't. If Azure is in place and you've already got some infrastructure up there, basic networking, identity, and the fundamental pieces to WVD, it's obviously optional to just layer that on top of that existing environment with minimal reconfiguration. So that's a standardized deployment to kind of roll through the existing infrastructure, put WVD into the environment, and begin working on use cases. For folks who've not done anything in Azure, we've got, as Phil mentioned, the Cloud Adoption Framework, which is actually a Microsoft framework that ACS has put together a templatized approach for deployment, which is to get a landing pad for WVD as a use case into Azure quickly, and while stepping through all the security controls and everything that we need to do that securely. So those are kind of our two decision points on depending on where the organization's at. The Cloud Adoption Framework, going through that is roughly 7 to 10 days with the templatized, standardized onboarding into Azure, dealing with breaking out the administration, everything that's needed to make Azure a platform that's usable for the organization, tailored to the individual team setup. Obviously, with the intent of using Windows Virtual Desktop as our first use case, but our Cloud Adoption Framework sets up for success for multiples. And this is how we go about deploying our Greenfield implementations when doing WVD, getting that base framework out there, which allows us to pivot to other things later, but also ensures that we make Windows Virtual Desktop a successful implementation from both a administrative and a performance perspective. So this involves walking through governance best practices, going through the Microsoft stack from a security perspective, and then actually deploying out core services, fully documenting the environment, and doing so in a templatized and scripted way so that it can take hours and days instead of weeks and months. Our approach to doing Windows Virtual Desktop, assuming the Cloud Adoption Framework is in place in some way, is a straightforward 3-step process of environment deployment, image creation, and then user acceptance testing and density testing. Basically, going through the motions of building out the individual use case and figuring out how many user sessions with the use case that's in front of us we can fit per machine, which then will drive the financial model for WVD consumption for that use case, but also, again, kind of validation, making sure that the technology works. Front of mind here is developing a business process, because unless you've already been in Azure, it's going to be a bit of a translation for on-premises teams, how things are being dealt with, what the administrative process looks like. It is a bit of a transition to go from not having any exposure to Azure to fully utilizing WVD. But we have been through that process several times, helping partner organizations not only get started on Azure very quickly, but with the skill set transformation that goes along with Windows Virtual Desktop, being able to independently run and administer the environments. So there are some prereqs to deploying Windows Virtual Desktop. I mean, not listed here is Azure, is a domain controller, or excuse me, an Azure subscription, an Azure Active Directory, and Office 365. Those are all assumed. So once that's been done, we need a source of identity truth. Now, if your organization is leveraging Azure Directory domain services, the PaaS offering for Azure Active or for actual LDAP and domain services works perfectly fine. DC access in Azure, either on-premises domain extended out to Azure or just routed to via networking, which would then drive the the actual network connectivity. And then there is a consideration around SSO. How do we want the user experience to be with login, with graceful allocation of OneDrive storage, for example, and how we want the app experience specific to Microsoft applications to look and feel. Once that's been done, there's the same concept of profiles that's been along the ride with us for VDI in general over the years. Windows Virtual Desktop allows us to use FS Logics for profile management, which is in and of itself something that is fully configurable and tailorable to how your organization wants to actually leverage storage and profiles. So we've done everything from full profile encapsulation with FS Logics to just getting down to the specific app data folders that we care about and purging everything else, and then leveraging OneDrive for user data. There's a number of paths forward here depending on how your organization needs to provide access to files and for your users. Collaboration is also a factor in this. So there's a number of different technologies, Azure native, that work in conjunction here. And then we've got the upfront configuration of the environment and the prereqs to get it set up. Subscription owner, global admin, and obviously we need local Active Directory admin to be able to fully go through and set the environment up. So if anybody on the phone has got disparate teams who handle different pieces of this, it winds up being a collaboration between desktop support, server/systems teams, and networking to get this fully up and running and deployed. High-level architecture for Windows Virtual Desktop abstracts the architecture of remote desktop services that traditionally has been Microsoft's delivery model for VDI, and they take the traditionally difficult pieces of that to deal with, which is the web access, the management plane, load balancing, and the gateway and the actual connection broker. Those all become PaaS services. We get an SLA associated with the uptime of these. We do minor configuration, but for the most part, those are available to us. That is the WVD service, and that is something that is fully managed by Microsoft, and we don't need to do anything with other than hook up our infrastructure to underneath. Within the actual subscription stuff that we've got access to is all of our infrastructure. So everything connecting to the Microsoft platform service is infrastructure as a service machines that have agents on them that make them WVD machines. Within the environment, there could be some variance around what we've got set up from a networking perspective. I mean, those things are all tailorable depending on the security footprint that's required. We've set through deploying Windows Virtual Desktop in compliant environments, non-compliant environments. There's a path forward for several use cases with this in the healthcare arena, because ultimately the access to this front end is fully accessible via any HTML5 device anywhere, as well as any Android, iOS, or Windows device that's applicable with the agents. So there's we can push Windows Virtual Desktop to mobile devices. We can publish mobile applications. There's a pretty flexible delivery model with the high-level architecture that we're dealing with here. And then what makes Windows Virtual Desktop a little bit unique is the actual multi-session Windows 10 operating system that Microsoft has delivered as a result, or for use in this environment. This allows us to present a Windows desktop to multiple users on the same compute footprint. So we get away from having to do one-to-one desktop to user allocation, which allows us to stack user sessions as dense as we can fit them on individual machines, which reduce long-term operational overhead. We reduce our compute costs, and we provide the most flexibility that we can as far as cost controls around spinning machines down and using auto scaling in the environment to optimize the actual cost runtime, as well as performance and availability for our users. Because again, our main goal here is to balance the end user experience from a performance and capability standpoint with the cost of actually running the solution. What we've got is actually pre-built-in optimizations for Office 365, even an image that already has all of the applications in that suite done for us, so we don't need to go through an image creation process of dealing with Office. Those also work as underlying prereqs for other applications that, for example, open up Excel to spit out a CSV file. And the ability to scale this up and down once we've got the underlying use case defined and our image and our infrastructure built for it is as easy as using some automation to either expand or contract the amount of resources that we have out there. There's quite a bit of automation built around, or capability built around Windows Virtual Desktop by virtue of being in Azure. We've got full PowerShell access to the entire platform, for example, from a service level down to the individual endpoint. So there's quite a bit that can be done, again, kind of tailored to the individual use case as well as the organization and what you're actually looking to do, because everybody's a bit different. A lot of the use cases that I'm going to go over here in a minute are repeatable. We've done them in various different verticals with the same goal in mind, but delivering different things. But around all of that is a robust automation platform via Azure, where we on the ACS side have produced quite a bit for management, orchestration, and ease of use. But it's also a greenfield opportunity for anybody who's interested in producing their own automation to be able to do so. What we've got is several different virtualization scenarios. So again, dealing with COVID-19 response, obviously we're looking at workforce augmentation, being able to provide people access to their workspace, their files, their applications, everything that they are used to doing on premises but remotely. There's also been quite a bit of implementation around regulated workloads and security. The Windows Virtual Desktop service itself is HIPAA certified. So we've got several different use cases we can walk through as far as app delivery is concerned in FinServ, healthcare, education, government. Those are all of the, obviously not all of the compliance standards, but at least the ability to leverage PHI, again, dealing with COVID response, putting applications in the hands of people who need to use them in real time to affect their jobs. And then we've got our concept of BYOD. So if we've got specific groups of employees internally that have specialized applications they need to access, or something along the lines of a licensed software that only needs to go out to certain people, or we've got net new projects with remote workers who are international, for example. Several sort of use cases that straddle the employee-specific implementation. Research workstations are also a big use case for this, providing that outside access point to a secure, compliant environment using Windows Virtual Desktop as a jump-off point. And then obviously within engineering, we're typically dealing with graphical backed applications, CAD, ArcGIS, several other items that are leveraging GPU workloads are capable of being delivered in Azure in multiple fashions. They can be delivered in Azure natively through Windows Virtual Desktop, fully utilizing everything in the platform. But for those of you that have got some sunk costs and investment in VDI infrastructure on-prem, everything that we're talking about delivering here via Windows Virtual Desktop is hybrid capable. So we can actually leverage existing Citrix, existing RDS environments, whatever we've got on-prem as far as existing infrastructure. This can layer on top of that in a hybrid fashion and deliver applications to our end users however we need to. So one of the first use cases is fairly obvious, which is our remote workers, and providing access to people who were no longer able to go into the office for a multitude of reasons. So leveraging our multi-session desktop again, so we can get user density as high as we possibly can, to be able to showcase some cost savings by reducing the amount of compute overhead in the environment. What this generally leads us to doing is building out the standardized application set that those frontline workers are using. Now, this could be we try to do this as general as possible. So grabbing the largest swath of the organization as we can, and then providing any sort of outlier or edge case applications through different means. In the remote worker scenario, we are typically leveraging FS logics to improve the user experience a bit, but to varying degrees, not necessarily grabbing all user data. We're pushing quite a bit of things off to OneDrive for the express intent of saving costs on storage. But there is a use case for profiles in the environment. And then because we're leveraging domain join machines, we have full group policy capability for customization, tailoring, and ultimately the lockdown of the environment. Most policies that have been developed for traditional VDI, specific to Windows 10, are applicable here. They're usable. We're using the same policies to lock down Windows 10 OSs that you would be in other means as well. And then we've got obviously any sort of shares, file sharing, collaboration, infrastructure that exists is usable in the environment. Although with some caveats around performance, depending on where those things live, we step into using sync services to provide the best experience. And one of the big things that the WVD has solved for a lot of organizations that were not properly set up for the volume of VPN is we do not require VPN for access into this environment. It goes through the secure connection broker, and then everything just works. So the deployment scenario for this remote worker is where we've got again whatever the standard Windows apps and tools are. We've stepped through this use case a couple times to deal with international-based development teams. Instead of going through the complexity of providing VPN access, having to support VPN agents, for example, we've used Windows Virtual Desktop to be the front end for access for people all over the world, getting into US-based data centers to collaborate with projects that are being worked on, applications that are being built, several different options from a team collaboration perspective, but leveraging a combination of OneDrive for individual user storage, which does have built-in collaboration capabilities, but also file sharing with traditional file sharing technologies that are out there. Gone through the process of locking the environment down so that C drive isn't accessible, for example, that no changes can be made, nothing can be saved, purely pushing the storage off onto SMB and OneDrive, hiding everything else. And again, with geographically dispersed workforces, no need for VPN, no need for radius integration or any of that the stuff that would be required to provide traditional access. Another option, again, previously mentioned the ability to leverage existing infrastructure. So if you have Citrix on-prem, for example, and you've got that as an option for your users, but you have a capacity issue, we do have the ability to provide an outlet for that, either by taking applications that are being delivered by that environment and publishing them in Windows Virtual Desktop to alleviate some of the compute, or even being able to extend existing solutions and existing tool sets out to Azure, because there are several different vendors that are supported in this environment. But also being able to just leverage maybe applications that are difficult to deploy to people at home, for example. So if there's an applications that require complex install or require licensing that we don't want to support on an individual endpoint basis, this is an opportunity for us to centralize those in traditional supportable server infrastructure, and then publish individual apps, publish individual multi-session OS, depending on what the use case is. But the goal here is to get all of our applications in a single pane of glass. So we are able to actually deliver this, deliver a mixture of published applications and desktop in the same place in Azure, and the end user with some behavior training can simply leverage everything that they've got in a single pane of glass. How that kind of looks is we've done some implementation in the nonprofit healthcare space around getting a standard desktop that's got applications that all users use, and then having all of those users have any departmental specific applications for them published via app publishing. So how that functionally looks within the desktop that the user logs into is there is the Windows Remote Desktop agent installed on that desktop, and as soon as that's signed in, applications appear on the start menu as if they're installed locally. Obviously, they're not. They're installed in application servers that are also in the infrastructure locally from a network perspective, living in the same network and data center within Azure that the user's connected to, so they'll have really good performance. But what that allows us to do is, again, provide a single pane of glass for all apps, including ones that are not installed directly on the desktop session that the user is connecting to. They'll have to pass authentication unless you've gone through the SSO setup to get into these things. But once auth is passed to an individual app server, the rest of the apps on that server open up without any interaction. What this allows us to do is kind of customize, the environment as we see fit for our users, and provide them, a single pane of glass for all of their apps, where we've already gone through the configuration of storage and determined how we want users to save their stuff, where we want them to do that, and have all of those things from an administrative and an IT standpoint, all in one place for end user support. Now, they are absolutely able to launch individual applications off of the dashboard if they were so inclined, which is why I mentioned that's a little bit of user behavior training. But there are multiple ways to kind of step into that process and get them more used to it. Now, long term, roadmap wise, Microsoft's solution for applications is shifting a bit away from published apps like we see them here into doing containerized applications that get dynamically attached to the actual desktop OS for the user. Same functional delivery model as what we've got here, but done in a bit of a cleaner way. So that building the business process around doing this hybrid setup is something that's long-term supported by the Microsoft roadmap. And then another very popular use case, and administrative means several things for several different folks, but administrative workstations. This could be IT administration. We've done workstations where we deploy out full remote server administrative tools to be able to manage on-prem without going through hoops, or providing an access mechanism to manage everything in Azure, or both. And then providing, again, a variable size environment, something that can be fully shut off, only used 8 hours a day, for example, or high privilege access users such as IT folks can turn things on in the portal but then hop into a jump box to do their jobs. So this allows us quite a bit of flexibility, again, with alleviating VPN connectivity, alleviating any sort of network complexity that may be currently built for outside access, allowing us to fully go through a site-to-site tunnel via Azure into the organization. And then GPU is its own animal. If anybody has gone through the process of looking at providing graphic processor-backed applications, doing this on-prem, depending on the technology stack you've chosen, has NVIDIA licensing in it, for example. None of that exists in Azure. Everything is baked into the compute costs that you have from a license perspective. So we are able to leverage the full breadth of NVIDIA, as well as now the AMD GPU machines, to provide access to GPU-backed apps. This allows us to potentially do things that were cost prohibitive before, because we do have the ability to simply leverage the same auto scaling and same telemetry that we can do with compute-bound workloads, but actually pulling that off of the graphical driver itself to be able to do telemetry-based scaling. So there's options again with being able to do variable runtime with graphical applications, to potentially dive into something you were not able to before, because you no longer need to have a large capital expense for GPU hardware on-prem, and because this is in Azure, and we've got variable runtime capabilities around the infrastructure here, it is something that is very achievable in multiple delivery models, depending on the applications that are being used. Any application-specific licensing is very simply making sure that we can route to the licensing location for that app. That can mean several things depending on the application, but we've stepped through quite a few GPU applications. They've been very popular with engineering departments, with anybody doing visualization. So we've got a growing catalog of things that we've stepped through and fully built out. As I mentioned, there are several options for Windows Virtual Desktop. One of them is leveraging Citrix. So if you've got Citrix on-prem, you've already got sunk costs in terms of Citrix infrastructure licensing, and that's where your team's skill sets lie. There's no need to reinvent the wheel and dive headfirst into a new platform. There is the capability of extending your existing infrastructure, your existing tool sets out to Azure with Citrix. Fundamentally, it's still Citrix, but underneath the hood, we are capable of leveraging the Windows 10 multi-session OS, which will allow us to do some of the cost optimization around densely packing user sessions on individual compute instances where we can. And this also facilitates that hybrid journey. Now, there is a path off of Citrix as well, because all of the licensing required to use Windows Virtual Desktop is tied into Office 365 entitlements. There potentially is no need to deal with Citrix licensing or any third-party licensing as far as CAL's user concurrency goes, when you've got the Microsoft licensing already there, and WVD being included with it. VMware also has a Horizon Cloud implementation within Windows Virtual Desktop. Again, what makes it WVD is the multi-session OS underneath the hood. Both VMware and Citrix are again fully supported in the platform. We've done production implementations with both their tool sets. Again, this is an exercise in where do you already have licensing? Where are your skill sets? What are your people, or what are the people working on this comfortable using? Would be a reason to use one of the the larger providers that are out there for a management plane. Ultimately, behind the scenes, this is all still Azure infrastructure that we need to make sure is built out through the Cloud Adoption Framework, where any of these become options. So the licensing for Windows Virtual Desktop is likely already in the environment. It's the M365 suite, various flavors of it, all include the full usage of the platform. Ultimately, CALs also still work in our Windows 10 licensing, is what actually gets us access to the environment itself. So this is for anybody who has any sort of educational use cases. Their student use benefit is includes the licensing for this. Anybody who is not on the education side, it is tied into the M365 or Windows 10 licensing. Several options to get into the platform, and obviously from a proof of concept perspective, several options to kind of kick the tires and make sure that the environment fits your needs. And as mentioned, CALs are obviously usable. Underneath the hood, Windows 10 multi-session is actually Server 2016 kernels. So you do have the ability to use CALs there too. And then the other costs for Azure are obviously compute. So as soon as we determine, what's your minimum runtime for pools look like, how many machines is that, how many concurrent user sessions are we looking at, we go through a cost optimization exercise where we look at moving as much of the environment as makes financial sense into reservations. Microsoft has changed the way that reservations work, no longer requiring the upfront capital expense to get into 1 and 3 year RIs. That makes this something that's advantageous for us to use in several places in a Windows Virtual Desktop architecture to reduce the hourly runtime costs as much as possible, to keeping the cost footprint for the overall solution down. Because this is all built on Microsoft's ecosystem, we've got the combination of Azure and Microsoft 365 security features that are wrapped around the services that make up Windows Virtual Desktop. We use reverse connect proxy from the Microsoft services where the users are connecting to get into the actual machines. So there's no exposure to the WVD machines to the open internet. It goes through that process. We've got full identity visibility around the platform through Azure Active Directory, as well as all of the security features around MFA, conditional access, RBAC, for access to the resources actually in the portal. We can put MFA in front of our users, including third-party integrations for the front-end broker access for Windows Virtual Desktop. So that's absolutely an option as well from a security standpoint. Ultimately, if you are a Sentinel shop, you can capture the vast majority of the telemetry around this environment through that as well. And then again, just a kind of a reiteration. The other option in Windows Virtual Desktop is actual Windows Server apps. We don't do these as often because it's more, we've got multiple ways to deliver service-based applications, but we can. And we can actually migrate Windows service apps and infrastructure directly here and provide sort of a lift and shift approach with a long-term option of kind of moving into more native and more flexible delivery models with the WVD services. So just as a quick summary of kind of the high level requirements, basically Windows Virtual Desktop is potentially a multi-user Windows 10 experience. You can do the traditional one-to-one desktops if you were so inclined. There's costs associated with doing that, but what we also have the ability to do within the single session desktops is actually fully support Windows 7 and lift and shift those workloads up to Azure. So that is something that we can do with Windows Virtual Desktop that does work supported. And then we've got either remote apps or full desktop support, which gives us some flexible delivery models. And because these are ultimately Azure resources, we have all of Azure's monitoring, telemetry, log analytics capabilities around the environment if you were so inclined to use them. Now, again, I mentioned earlier in the call that we actually put together a management solution application for Windows Virtual Desktop that includes full administrative and troubleshooting telemetry and logging for things that we would need from a support perspective. But there is native functionality available as well in Azure. Now to transition over to what the solution that we've put together for management and scale of the platform. As Phil mentioned earlier in the call, we've been working in the WVD space for COVID response in particular since everything started going awry a few months ago. But prior to that, we've been working with Windows Virtual Desktop and implementing this in several different markets, several different organization sizes prior to any of that happening. So as a result of that, we've gotten some insight onto how to take Windows Virtual Desktop successfully to production state with an organization, how to wrap the business process around that, as well as how we deal with our cost controls in real time in the environment. So we have we put together some robust and configurable single pane of glass auto scaling that allows us to take in telemetry as well as sessions and as well as schedule all in a single auto scaling event, which effectively allows us to do three things at once. We could set our host pool settings based off of the density testing that we do, how many concurrent sessions we're going to have available to us, and then we can have that be as minimal as possible. We can take that down to no machines if you wanted to fully shut stuff off during certain hours of the day, but we've got configurable capabilities around what just kind of runs at all times, but also the concept of peak. So for most organizations, peak hours are going to be 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Maybe that varies a bit, but whatever that winds up being, we do have the ability to wrap different logic around times during the execution during those times, where we can have a different minimum amount of hosts, a different number of available sessions, and a different number of machines that scale in and scale out dynamically. So that is how many additional machines are deployed to the environment when we do a scaling event. We allow for the configuration of peak hours to be able to deal with logon storms, to be able to deal with massive amounts of users hitting at times that we can predict, and where we can't, we fall back on telemetry. So obviously, we don't necessarily know what a given application is going to do from a performance standpoint. So we're able to leverage our the tooling that we have here to help us do some right sizing and be able to get some robust data through testing. And also, again, for the GPU workloads, GPU machines in Azure are some of the most expensive hourly runtime you're going to get. So we want to be very mindful of not using those beyond what the actual usage is from an application standpoint, which is where we also do auto scaling based off of GPU telemetry. Because again, we're trying to balance the end user experience, making sure that they've got something that's performant, that works well, that's also that we're also being cost conscious of. What we've done from a deployment perspective for Windows Virtual Desktop is a couple of things. We've run into several organizations that have various DNS configurations where simply running through the portal deployment process does not work for various reasons. There becomes manual steps that are put into that process. We completely separate the deployment from getting machines out there with all of the underlying diagnostics to then making them WVD machines after the fact with automation running, which gives us time for manual A record creation, for non-dynamic DNS to process. Whatever the underlying challenges are for the platform, we can deal with them kind of in one shot, and then with automation finish the process. In the install process we've got developed, and the templates that we put together include all of our diagnostics. So feeding in everything that we care about from an administration and just a long-term reporting perspective is baked in, and we've got the ability to do everything that we do via images. So image management is built into our platform. We've got automated image creation based off of golden images that sit in Azure, where we've got the ability for the business process to be simply log into a machine, patch it, update your software, run through a new image creation process, and go through the automation to create a new pool and move your users over to it. Helps facilitate the long-term management and patching procedures for a lot of our partners. And our development cycle for what we've been adding to this has been based off of feedback from folks that have been using WVD in production for months. So part of what we put together from a telemetry perspective is, what do we need to know to know if Windows Virtual Desktop is worth our investment, is one of them. Also, we assume people are using applications that we have out there, but do we actually know what they're using? So we've kind of built in a bunch of dashboards, queries, and diagnostic tooling that allows us to get our user concurrency, max user sessions, unique logons, what apps are being used, and be able to give us the data that we need to do continuous improvement, right sizing, and iteration through our environments. Obviously, we want to settle in on using applications that people are actually using. If people aren't using them and the data says so, we maybe don't need to go through the complexities of making some applications available on a desktop. Maybe some make more sense to be published via apps to smaller groups of users. Several options, again, kind of long-term from a usability standpoint that we've spent time on building into our product, as well as making everything as easy as possible for folks who do not necessarily have the Azure expertise that would be helpful in the long-term administration of Windows Virtual Desktop. So that's the end of my piece here. I'll kind of turn this back over to Phil to go over how we have been supporting our partners that have started into Windows Virtual Desktop, either prior to COVID or as a COVID response. And again, our goal here is to get our partners comfortable with the platform so that they're able to independently stand on their own 2 feet, continue to scale and use it, and make it as successful for the organization as it possibly can be.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Good presentation. Hopefully everyone that is on the call got a lot of good information around WVD, how it's implemented, and some of the work that we performed around there, as well as our cloud control solution. So as far as support goes, if you are down the path of using WVD, we have a number of customers where maybe they're in the implementation, having trouble standing it up, having trouble with scaling it out. So we can come in and provide support, leveraging the experience that we have with WVD. Other customers are Greenfield, so they need somebody to come in and stand up the environment for them. Some customers are interested in our cloud control solution, as Chris mentioned, for scaling and cost control and those sorts of items. So we have many different offerings around WVD, and we will be following up with each one of you with an email afterwards. So certainly feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to set up a call with Chris or one of our other engineers or architects to discuss how you may like to leverage our support model, or if you just have questions around WVD, I'm happy to speak with you. So the first bullet there, any WVD customer, either a new customer or existing customer who's interested in our cloud control solution, we're offering a 30-day free trial for you to get in and kick the tires with that. We'll come in, we'll install the software, configure it, get it running in your environment, and then let you run with it for 30 days to test drive that. And then, as I already mentioned, we have different managed services and support offerings around supporting WVD and any of the other Microsoft Azure Office 365 Dynamics products that we support. Next slide, Chris. I believe that's just my contact information, or our contact information. So again, I'm Phil Rainsberger. I'm the account executive. Chris Bennett was the practice delivery manager. Have our phone numbers and emails there. Feel free to reach out to us if you need any support. But I thank you all for joining. I hope you got a lot of value out of the presentation today, and I look forward to hearing from you. And at this time, we'll go ahead and close out the presentation. Again, thank you everyone for joining, and hope to talk to you in the future.
Thanks everybody. Appreciate your time today.
Bye-bye.